Okay, so let's look at some of this break-even stuff. Break-even. You want to go? You want to write them on the board? All right. So chapter 20. So the only thing I'm going to test on out of chapter 20 is going to be break-even. Because we kind of had to build up to it. All right, so let's go to question 6. All right. All right, so it says corn sold 8,000 units of product A, 2,000 units of product B during the past year. Contribution margins for A and B are 30 and 60 respectively. Corn has fixed costs of 378,000. The break-even point in units is. Did we work this problem? We did this problem. So that's where we stopped. All right, let's pick another one. Oh. All right, let's look at this next one. Let's look at Beamer. Nope, I'm not going to test you on operating leverage. All right, here's another one. All right, so here's a sales mix. This is 9. Okay, so on a sales mix, all we're doing is what percentage um, is what product. So it's 20% ARCs and 56,000, 80% bins. That's your sales mix. It's what percentage based on units. Uh, you add them together and get 70,000. So 20% is ARCs and 80% is bins. Now, just to get the sales mix, it's how many, just based on quantity. So 14,000 and 56,000. So you add those up and get 70,000, and 20% of that is ARCs and 80% is bins, just based on number of units. Let's see what the second thing is. Carter sells 2 products. Unit selling price of E. Okay, so what this means is when you're trying to calculate product mix, if you have 2 different products, you have to make a third product in order to calculate break even. So remember that, and I think that was the problem that we just worked the last time. That last problem, you have to make product E, which is the combination of the 2 products, or could be more than 2 products. Or it says because E is for enterprise, so the whole enterprise. So what they want, so they want unit selling price of E, and that would be the weighted average. So the selling price for ARCs is 120. I think it's weighted average. So 14,000 times 120 is 1,680,000. And then the unit selling price for bins is 80, 56,000 times 80 is 4,480,000. I'm trying to get a weighted average. So the weighted average is $88. I think that's what they want to get. Yeah, divided by the 70,000. So you're doing weighted averages. So I took the 14,000 multiplied times the selling price of 120 and got 1,680,000, and 56,000 times 80 and got 4,480,000. And then I totaled that up and divided it by 70,000. So the weighted average selling price is $88 per unit. All right, let's see what the next one is. All right, so Carter cut variable cost of each. So again, you're going to have to do weighted average. So 14,000 times 80 is 1,120,000, and 56,000 times 60 is 3,360,000. Oops. So that is 4,480,000 divided by 70,000 is 64. You're calculating the weighted average variable cost. And it's a weighted average. You're weighting it by how much they're um, costing out at that price. Okay. All right. And let's see what's next. Unit contribution margin for E. So same deal. So 14,000 times 40. You know what contribution margin is, right? What's the formula for contribution margin? Sales minus variable cost is contribution margin. So I'm getting 24 for the contribution margin of E. Yep. Good. All right. So assuming that the fixed costs are 960,000, what is their break-even point? So, and we know what break-even point is, right? Fixed cost divided by contribution margin. So we just calculated contribution margin for E, which is the entire company. So if their fixed costs are 960, it's okay as long as she gets there. Does that make sense? So we just calculated the contribution margin. Break even is fixed cost divided by contribution margin. So 960,000 divided by $24. $24 is the weighted average contribution margin. The contribution, or no, for break even point, it's contribution margin. It's fixed cost divided by contribution margin. And contribution margin is sales minus variable cost. So actually, we could have calculated the contribution margin because the first problem that we did for Carter was the sale price of 88, and the second one, what was the variable cost, which is 64. So we could have just subtracted that and gotten the contribution margin instead of calculating the weighted average. Okay, good. All right. All right. See what else we want to do. All right, skipping that one. Let's do it. All right, so look at this one. What number is this? 15. Connor has fixed cost of 400,000, selling price is 25, variable cost is 15. Break even sales if the variable costs are increased by $2 is. No, look what it says. If I had time to watch it, I could make so much money playing the stock market. Carnival jumped up to 15.17 this morning. Now it's back down to 14.90. It started the day at 15.09, so I could have made 6 cents going up, and it dropped back to 14.90. So I could have sold it, bought it back, and then wait for it to go back up again. So it's on the way back up again. That's how you make money in the stock market. Well, one way if you're a day trader. All right, how we doing? Okay, so selling price is 25. So if the variable cost went up to 17, that means that your contribution margin is 8. So $400,000 divided by 8 is 50,000 units. Good. How many questions should I put on these tests? 50, 30, I think. Yeah, 30. You got 2 hours. That's not bad. Yeah. So 25 minus 17 is 8, and then 400,000 divided by $8 is 50,000. Oh, should we look at the flying cloud? All right, so they've decided to increase their hourly workers' wages, which will increase the unit variable cost by 10%. Increasing the salaries of factory supervisors and property taxes will increase fixed costs by 4%. if sales price are held constant, the next break-even point for Flying Cloud will be well, remember the 90% rule? Anytime there are two answers that are exact opposites, there's a 90% chance the correct answer is one of them. So you could be right, but let's just do a little bit sort of scientifically than that. So if variable cost goes up by 10%, 10% by 100 is $10, so that makes it 110. So the contribution margin is 140, right? Contribution margin is 140. You got it, Melanie? So variable cost is 100. If it increases by 10%, it goes to 110. And your contribution margin is selling price minus variable cost. So 250 minus 110. We're trying to get break even, so we're going to take the fixed cost and divide by contribution margin. Right, or no, divide by the 140. So we subtract sales minus variable cost to get contribution margin. So 250 minus 110. Right, the contribution margin is 140. And then it says that the fixed costs are going to increase by 4% because they're going to raise the supervisor's salary and the property taxes are going up. So those are both fixed costs. So if you take the 840,000 times 1.04, right? So that will give me a 4% increase. $1.04. So if we want to say that number increases by 4%, so take the 840 times 1.04, and that will give you that number with the 4% increase on it. Okay, so 873,600 is your new fixed cost. If you divide that by 140, $873,600. Yes. Wait a minute. That sounds more like it. What did I do? Times 1.04. 873,600 is your fixed cost. Well, but I'm calculating my break even. Well, that's total break even. That's total break. So if I took just the increase, okay, if I took just the increase, well, 4% is just the increase. So if I wanted to get the full amount, which I don't know what the previous one was, well, I could calculate though. So the previous one would be 840 divided by 150. So the previous break even was 5,600 units. So now it's 873,600 divided by 140. So it's 6,240. So yeah, it increases by 640 units. You could, since they're just after the increase. All right, so if I took the 840,000 times 0.04, that's 33,600. Divide that by the 140, that's 240 units. Yeah, so that won't work. Okay. All right. I'm going to work it up here. Oh, okay. Okay. So let's look at it. So they want to know what's the change in the break even point. So I'm going to calculate the original break even point first. So remember, break even is fixed cost, $840,000, divided by contribution margin, which is 250 minus 100, right? Sales minus variable cost. So you're right. So your break even, your old break even point was 5,600 units. So your new fixed cost goes up by 4%. So $840,000 times 1.04. So your new fixed cost is 873,600. Your new variable cost, 840,000 plus 4%. So I just multiplied it times 1.04. Okay. And then, so my new break the contribution margin, because the variable cost went up by 10%, so 250 minus 110, so my new contribution margin is 140. So that take 873,600 divided by 140. So my new break even is 6240. So it goes up by 640 units. Right. Yeah, probably. Good. All right. I think we're done. All right. So I'm going to save this. Yes. I never let you out early. So the last day of class, I'm going to let you out early.